Hey, I'm Jimmy Robinson, and you're listening to Inside China, a China marketing podcast brought to you by Ping Pong Digital. In each episode of Inside China, we give you our deep dive insights into a different area of the Chinese market, cutting through the noise to give you a quick lowdown on the biggest Chinese marketing news stories you need to know. We will even be addressing some of your concerns in our new FAQ segment later in the episode. Be sure to subscribe so you can catch new episodes on all major podcast platforms. The Chinese economy and market is dead, and I should invest elsewhere. Maybe this is a thought you've had, or sums up an article that has been posted in the past few months. But how true is this statement? In today's episode, we're going to address this head on. We'll talk about why some people have concerns about this and what the facts and realities are for brands who have already invested in China or are considering China as part of their global expansion efforts. There was a lot of talk online when Too Faced, a well-known cosmetics brand, shut down their Tmall store in China and decided that they would no longer focus on China as a primary market for them, at least in the short term. But was this because of the post-COVID economic woes that have seen record high unemployment rates in some of China's major cities, which we would expect would result in Chinese consumers being more cautious on their spending and tightening their purse strings for those little cosmetic luxuries? This would feed very nicely into the narrative that the Chinese market is on the decline and that brands should focus elsewhere. But in reality, $146 billion was spent during Singles Day in 2023, so it doesn't seem like Chinese consumers in China aren't willing to spend. So what are the issues that brands are facing? Well, there was a time when any foreign products would have been perceived as better quality than local competitors, and for some brands their products may actually be great quality and could be better than local Chinese competitors. But are they communicating this effectively? Estee Lauder, who owns Too Faced, is a huge company, and many see Too Faced as a sign that large brands just can't win when it comes to China. There have been voices that have blamed COVID for the lackluster sales from Too Faced, but the reality is that other brands and local competitors in China are just doing a better job. Too Faced suffered from a classic case of established market ego. When brands from developed countries enter into emerging markets with the same strategies that they would adopt in their home market, why wouldn't they? They can see many successful case studies of this working time and time again. But how old are these case studies? And in 2024, what do brands need to be thinking about and considering when entering into China? Now you might be saying, but they have local Chinese staff and probably hired local experts as well. Well, sometimes brand owners don't like being told they're wrong. They will oftentimes go for someone who they perceived as being aligned with their beliefs because they feel like they know best. And this is where many brands can struggle in China. I've had discussions with brands explaining that they will need to explore new social platforms in China because that's where the trends are emerging. But decisions on this can end up being so delayed or just ignored that the opportunities go by, and instead they will seek an alternative opinion that suits their narrative. Sometimes it's not about unfamiliarity of the China market at all that causes these issues, but it's their choices that cause the issues. Picking the right platforms and strategies, from influencers and ad targeting options to innovative ideas in creativity and execution, are what brands should be prioritizing. I know what you're thinking. This sounds like a lot of work, but hey, reaching 1.4 billion consumers was never going to be an easy task, but the rewards can be huge. Estee Lauder still has beauty brands in China that are constantly in the top 10 of the best-selling cosmetic brands in the marketplace. So the market isn't stagnant. It's quite the opposite. It's vibrant, it's fast-moving, and brands need to recognize that. KFC is a brand that has done very well in China. Not because it just took what it had in the US and made a carbon copy of that in China, but because they adapted their menu to Chinese tastes. If you walk into a KFC today in Beijing or any city in China for that matter, you will find congee, a popular local porridge. You'll find rice dishes galore, egg tarts, and local tea flavors instead of just the average sodas that we're used to consuming in the US, EU, or UK. You will even find Peking duck wraps, which I can tell you now are quite delicious. Now, KFC was one of the first Western food chains to enter China, and it certainly has benefited from that first mover advantage. But that didn't stop them understanding local cultural sensitivities, which you may think is obvious, but we all remember the Dolce & Gabbana saga a few years ago, and if you don't know what that's about, well, you're in luck as we have an episode all about this. Check out one of our podcasts in Season 1, Episode 1, and that will give you the lowdown on everything that went down with Dolce & Gabbana. But it's obvious. Western brands just keep making cultural mistakes when it comes to China. A Tencent study actually recently showed that the majority of Gen Z consumers in China don't view a brand's foreign origin as a positive in their decision-making process. That's not to say that it's not a positive overall, but it's not one of the key factors that make up that decision-making process anymore. Hogan, the hot take sneaker brand for 2024, is seeing success in China at the moment. They're appealing to Gen Z audiences by partnering with popular TV show celebrities. They've had a strong digital presence in China, partnering with influencers such as stand-up comedians in their campaigns. When you look at their marketing materials, they're using very popular images. They're using peoples and styles that are tailored to the China market and just appeal to Chinese tastes. Now, they don't push for a Chinese name. For them, with their iconic H on the side of their shoes, that wouldn't necessarily make sense for them to push a Chinese name on all of their marketing materials or their brand as a whole. Instead, they've localized their visuals and campaigns, something that will benefit them greatly, since the sneaker market in China is expected to grow by 7% in 2024. In the first quarter of 2024, GDP in China grew 5.3% from a year ago. That's beating the 4.6% that many economists had predicted. This was also on the back of a 5.2% growth from the previous quarter as well. This is giving renewed optimism about the Chinese economy for 2024. Retail sales also grew by 4.7% within the first 3 months of 2024. But overall, foreign investment in China was down 10.4%. Beijing, after the 2 sessions earlier this year, has made it clear that reviving the Chinese economy and growing the economy is their top priority this year. And Chinese leaders have been on a wooing mission around the world to deepen cooperation and lure back foreign investment. The shift that is happening is all down to how brands need to communicate with a new generation of Gen Z consumers. They care about social issues. They care about sustainability. That has been an increasing concern that has been playing a greater factor into a consumer's decision-making process. It's not all about material gratification, and for brands who aren't willing to build authentic relationships with consumers and who instead just looking for quick market wins are going to find that they will struggle more in China. Values are shifting rapidly in China, and brands are failing to recognize this. But for those who do, the rewards can be great. So it seems that the talk of the China's economy being in a freefall are very, very premature. I was in Shanghai in February this year, and I can say from first-hand experience that capitalism is very much alive in China. And some brands are recognizing this and are investing in the right kinds of campaigns to succeed in 2024 and beyond. So, what can a brand do? Or should a brand have to think about when it comes to China? Firstly, let's leave your established market ego at the door and experiment with innovative new tools, campaigns, and solutions to drive your China growth. Listen to the experts. The more you're being told that you're wrong about how you think about China, the more likely it is that you're having an honest conversation with somebody about China. Take caution with this, but don't always trust those who work for you, as there can be a lot of yes people that end up surrounding you. Localize. Long gone are the days where you could just use your marketing materials from the US or the EU. You need something that speaks to Chinese consumers. Next up, we'll be addressing your questions and concerns. Okay, so I've got a new section for our podcast, which I'm calling our FAQ section. I've asked our client services team to tell me about some misunderstandings or misconceptions they've encountered. And I want to address those here so we can all learn and improve together. The first one is, I want to keep my brand name in English because that's my key selling point. I don't think that should ever be your key selling point, but I understand wanting to keep your brand as it is. Now, for a lot of brands, this is a huge misconception. Certain brands can get away with this in China. Think of Apple or Gucci. The misconception comes from the fact that many foreign markets will still use a phonetic alphabet, meaning that even if you don't know the meaning of the word, you can still pronounce it. Although, let's not get into the whole croissant or croissant debate. However, Chinese doesn't have this. So when Chinese customers are presented with a phonetic alphabet word, they can sometimes struggle to pronounce it correctly and, more importantly, are unlikely to remember it because of this. And Marketing 101 is to make sure that you're going to be memorable. Some of the biggest brands in the world have recognized this and will have a local brand name, so Chinese customers can talk about it with their friends. Funnily enough, Too Faced kept their name in English. Is this a case maybe of established market ego, you think? KFC, however, even just having 3 letters as their actual name, also decided on a local brand name when it came to China. Something that is present and very visible on all of their branding. Now, this won't be suitable for all brands. Think back to Hogan sneakers that we spoke about earlier. They still use Hogan in their marketing materials. A move that feels right and in keeping with this particular brand. We will see that for a lot of fashion brands where the name can be part of the logo, that they will oftentimes try to keep their original brand name. Others will come up with more innovative solutions. Take the cosmetic brand Charlotte Tilbury, for example. In their social platforms and e-commerce stores in China, you will see them use CT all the time, which is much easier for Chinese customers to remember and demonstrate some smart adaptation to tailoring a brand name for the China market. Funnily enough, Hogan also uses the letter H a lot across their social media platforms in China as well. Your product should be the key selling point in China, and depending on your industry and target market, you may very well benefit from having a good Chinese name. Just please don't use a translation tool for this. You have been warned. Next up are some of the latest Chinese news stories that you need to be aware of. Now, Jing Daily has done an excellent job covering the latest in China's consumer protection laws, a law that has been introduced to increase transparency and fairness in online marketplaces out in China. Stronger privacy protections will mean stricter controls on how personal data is collected, used, and shared. Companies must now obtain explicit consent from consumers before gathering their personal information and explain to them how they will use this information. There is greater accountability for e-commerce platforms who must ensure that their vendors adhere to fair business practices and resolve consumer disputes. Consumers now have a 7-day, no questions asked right to return a product purchased online in China. And they are cracking down on fake reviews, something that I wish we had more of in the West, to be honest. This will target fake product reviews and misleading ads and improve authenticity and trustworthiness in online marketplaces. The onus here is being put on platforms who will need to figure out new ways to adhere to these guidelines, so expect there to be a couple of hurdles to jump through when selling in China. That is it for today's episode. So, is the China market dead? Well, I think far from it. The tales of decline you will often hear from brands is down really to just bad decisions and choices. And some of the biggest brands in the world can sometimes have too much ego that hinders their market growth opportunities in China. We should look at the China market as an opportunity to develop an emerging market mindset, where we recognize the pace and style being different and ensure that we are aligned with those differences. The Chinese economy is beating economists' expectations in 2024 so far, and there are signs that this will continue. So the opportunities are there. The Chinese customers are ready and willing to spend. If you are subscribed already, thank you so much for supporting us. If you aren't subscribed yet, then hit that subscribe button and share it around. You can also find us on TikTok and other social platforms by searching Insight China. And if you would like me to address any questions you have about China or would like me to cover a specific topic, then drop us a DM on our Instagram. Again, just search for Insight China or Ping Pong Digital. A special thanks to Ping Pong Digital for making this podcast happen and to Jun for his theme music. I've been Jimmy Robinson. I'll catch you next time. 再见.